Alright, and welcome to this lesson where we're going to take a look at developing the dashboard page. So inside of the admin directory, we then want to go into dashboard, and inside of there we have our usual standard stuff, but here we have two images. The first one, small profile, that is going to be used in the circles right here, and then the second image, which is the divider, is an image that is going to be used in order to create the white space in between the two columns. Now we're not actually going to use the PNG, we're not going to target it directly. What we're going to do is convert it into a data URI, and if you're unsure what that is, we'll cover it later on. But right now I want to take a look at the dashboard.php and start to develop the markup. So first of all, what I want to do is take a look at the dashboard.php file, which I've got open in the browser, and also the text editor. I also have the SCSS file open for the styling, and the JavaScript file for when we need to use the chart.js API for creating our graphical data. So first of all, what I want to do is take a look at the body element and give it the ID of dashboard. That way, when I target that ID, I know I'm not going to affect any other page. Then also, I'm going to create a div with the ID of large box, and this is going to be the large box at the top of the page that contains our graphical data. And then inside of there, I want the header 1 element, and it's just going to say event views. Now it's not illustrated very well in Photoshop, but however, the header 1 is the brown bar going along the top, and obviously it will have its text in there explaining what this box is all about. Then what I'm going to do is take a look at adding in the canvas elements for our graphical data. So the first canvas element is going to have the ID of graph, and it's going to have the width attribute applied to it, and that's going to be set to 1200 pixels. So this is going to be shown for the desktop version, but then also we need to provide the graphical data for the tablet version and also for the small version as well, so for smartphones. So what I'm going to do is paste this in, change the ID to graph M, and the M stands for medium, and I'm going to change the width to 800 pixels. And then what I'm going to do is paste the same code in, change this to graph S, so that's graph small for the smartphone devices, and we're going to change the width to 400 pixels. So now that we have our first box in here, I want to go ahead and start to develop this before continuing on. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and take a look at the dashboard.scss and put in a few of the basic styles needed for the large box. So the first thing I want to do is target the ID large box. And then what I can do is tell this to float to the left so we get no spacing anomalies. I want to tell it to clear both because we don't want anything to the left or to the right of it. I want to set the margins to 35 pixels. That way we'll create the nice spacing all the way around the edges. And then also what I want to do is change the background color to cream, and go ahead and save that, hit refresh. That's currently what we've got. Now don't worry about this scroll bar down here, it's due to the canvas elements. Now the next thing I want to do is take a look at the header 1 element, and the header 1 element, as you know, is going to be for all of these boxes right here. So I can just target the ID dashboard and then target all the header 1 elements on this page. And first of all, let's get rid of any default margins. Then we also want to set the width to 100%. Then we're going to have the line height, which is also going to set the height of the header 1 to 40 pixels, but not only that, it will also align the text vertically in the center. Then what we have is the padding. So the padding is going to be 0 for the top and the bottom, and 20 pixels to the left and to the right, ensuring the text doesn't touch the edges of the box. Then also I want to change the background color to brown. Then I want to change the font color to text 2, which is the white text color. And then also I'm going to change the font size to 14 pixels, and then we also want to include our box sizing mix-in, which will include the padding that we set right here in the width, so that way it's not going to go outside the boundaries of the box. So I can save that now, we can simply hit refresh, and as you can see, that's our header 1. Now the next thing I want to do is take a look at these canvas elements and make sure that number 1, they stretch to the correct width, and we only display the canvas that we actually want at a certain resolution. So let's target all 3 of those elements. So I'm just going to target the graph first of all, then I'm going to target graph M and graph S. So we're targeting all 3 of those canvas elements because they all have styles that relate to one another. So you have the width, which is going to be 100%. Now also I can put in the exclamation mark and say important. And what this will do is if the style attribute has a width, which it will do because that's unfortunately how Chart.js works, what I can do is say, well, don't allow that style attribute to override this CSS property right here. And so that's what the important keyword does for us inside of CSS. And so now I can set the height to automatically adjust because this is a lot like an image. It works with pixel data, so we need to keep the aspect ratio. So if this is going to adjust fluidly, the height also has to adjust fluidly as well. And again, with that, Chart.js will actually set the height, so we want to say at important, so then again the style attribute can't override this CSS property. Then also I want to set the padding to 35 pixels so it doesn't touch the edges, and then also I'm going to use my box sizing mixin, so I'm going to say box sizing so that it includes the padding when I set the width and also the height as well. So once that has occurred, what I can do is then I can display certain elements and hide other elements that I don't need. So for example, with the graph, I want to display as a block because currently the canvas element displays like an inline block, but I want it to display as a block level element. And with graph M and graph S, I want to hide them by default and only show them when the screen resolution goes less than a certain amount of pixels, which will require a media query. So what I'm going to do is by default, I'm going to tell the medium and small graphs to hide by default, and then I can save that and we can hit refresh, and now you'll notice everything is starting to scale down, but we still can't see any graphical data. So let's move over to script.js and start to apply the code. So let's first of all take a look at the JavaScript that's needed to create the graph. So I'm just going to save that and hit refresh, and now you'll notice we have our graph. So what's happening here? Well, we have a variable that contains our data, so I've named this variable data, and this is an object right here. Inside of there we have the property labels, which is an array full of strings, and as you can see, they are being placed along the x-axis, so that's where your labels are being placed. Then also we have the data sets property, and that contains an array full of objects. Now in our case we only have one data set right here, but you can have more than one data set on the chart. But in our case, in this array we only have one object, which means we only have one data set. But you could put in another one just like so, just put in the comma and so forth. But right now, let's take a look at this data set. First of all, we have the fill color. Let's change it to red, and then go ahead and save it so you're able to see what the fill color is. And so that's the fill color right there. Again, you could have RGBA, HSLA, or the hex color value. So I'm just sticking with transparent yellow. It's very difficult to see right here, but it is there. Then also we have the stroke color. So that is the actual color of the line that is connecting the points. Then we have the point color, which is yellow. And so that is this point right here, and if I just make it a little bit larger, you're able to see those yellow points. And with those points, you also have a white stroke as well. So if you take a look at that, you'll see point stroke color is white. Then we have the data. So this is all basically styling. That's it. But this right here is to do with the actual points and where they're placed on the chart. So we have 15 first of all, as you can see there's 15, and you'll notice there's the exact same amount of numbers right here as there are labels. So each label has a point, and you just say where you want it to go on the chart. And that's it. That's literally how easy it is. Now the rest of it is making sure that it displays on the canvas. So what we're going to do is create a variable called CTX, and again, it doesn't have to be called CTX, but CTX refers to context, so the context of the canvas. What does the canvas contain? But we actually need to target the canvas, so I'm just going to say equals, and we're targeting the element with the ID of graph. I'm saying get 0, and then I'm saying get context, and it's going to be 2D. So the content of the canvas is 2D, and so that's what we're setting right there. So effectively we're now creating a drawing surface for us with our JavaScript. So that's just basically targeting the canvas and setting up the drawing surface, getting the context, and then we have the variable options, and this variable contains the options for our chart.js. So for example, we have Bezier curve set to false. By default, it's set to true. So if I was to save that and just hit refresh, you can see that now with the Bezier curve, it's very, very wavy. But I don't want that, so I'm going to set it to false. I've also said scale the font style, which is going to be bold, and also the font size is going to be 14 pixels. And then what I'm doing is I'm saying, right, create a new chart, and so this is referring to the chart.js API right now. And first of all, we need to pass in the context, so the drawing surface that we're going to draw our graphical data onto, which is our canvas, and of course it's 2D. And then I'm saying .line, so this means that I want a line graph, because you have all different types of graphs. You know, you have the pie charts and all the rest of it, and you can review their documentation, but right now we're using the line method to create a line graph, and of course it's going to need the data, so don't forget this variable contains our data, so I'm targeting that variable, and then also we can pass in the options. So that is this variable right here, which again is making sure that I've got the correct styling and so on and so forth. So I can save this now and hit refresh, and now you'll notice that we get the chart. But also don't forget that we have the medium and small chart as well. So what we need to do is make sure the canvas elements display in their retrospective view. So let's create a media query, and this media query is going to have the max width of 880 pixels, and so this is for the tablet resolution devices, and so we want to target the element with the ID of graph and say display as none, because we no longer want the desktop version displaying. But then what we want to do is target graph M and say display as a block level element, so then it becomes visible. So let's save that now and hit refresh, and now when we scale down, you'll notice that the large graph just disappears, and now we have our medium graph being displayed, but of course it has no data being applied to it. So let's go ahead and put in the code for the medium sized graph. So again, I'm just creating a variable, I'm saying CTX_M, so get the context of the medium canvas right here. So again, we're going to target the element with the ID of graph M, and then we're going to get its context and set it to 2D. Then we're creating a new chart. We are targeting CTX_M, so we're targeting that canvas's context, and we're creating a line graph just like we did before. And again, we're using the exact same data, so we don't need to put all that information in. And also we're using the exact same options. That's why I put the options into a variable. And so that's what we're doing right there. And of course you can do the same thing for the small canvas, but right now let's save this and hit refresh and make sure that it's working. So there you can see now it's a lot more legible, because right there it starts to become pretty unlegible, then it goes a little bit bigger. So you can see why I've done it in this manner. And then of course when we go down even further, I want to show the small canvas. So what I can do is simply copy this code out, and we're going to change the maximum width to 580 pixels and something in that regard. Again, you can play around with the figures if you want to. And then what we're going to do is target graph M, so the medium graph that's currently being displayed as a block level element, and now what I want to do is hide it by saying display none, and then we want to target graph S and display that as a block level element. And so when we do that, go ahead and save it, hit refresh, go and scale down, and what you'll notice is right there, when again things start to look a little bit unlegible, we want to then go to the small graph. So how are we actually going to do that? Well, again, it's very, very similar to what we've done here. Again, we're using the same data set and options. You can just paste this in below. CTX_S, And let's just change it down there. We're targeting the element with the ID of graph S, getting its context, setting it to 2D, targeting it with a new chart, telling it to create another line graph, and we're using the data and options like we did before. Save it, hit refresh. And there you go, there is your small graph. So that's what we have right here. And you can go ahead and play around with the values. So thank you for watching me in this lesson, and please join me in the next lesson where we'll continue on developing the dashboard.